So today's webinar is Teaching with the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook. The lead presenter today is Bill Russell, who is teaching this semester at Fordham University. Bill is also a principal in Transitioning to Green. He's joined on this call with two of his co-authors, Gina Wurtenberg, who is the president and CEO of Transitioning to Green and also is teaching at Rutgers, and Linda Kelly, who is the principal and enterprise ecologist for Transitioning to Green. Particularly for those who are listening to the recording, I'm going to read the announcement and then turn it over to Bill. With deep thought and inspiring examples, this updated book, published by Routledge in August 2018, engages readers by increasing their understanding and awareness of what sustainability means conceptually, practically, personally, and professionally. It provides readers with the tools and techniques to improve the social, economic, environmental performance of their organizations in both the short and the long term. Since sustainability is not achieved in a siloed environment, everyone has a critical role to play on this journey. The Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook, with full companion materials at thesustainableenterprisefieldbook.com, engages today's managers and leaders of organizations in both the private sector and civil society who are being challenged as never before to find ways to play a proactive role in understanding and addressing the risks and opportunities of sustainability.
Welcome, everybody. The slides that we prepared a little slide deck that I'll run through with you. And these opening slides are just really getting us started. And I know that everyone's going to be able to get the recording as well as see these slides later. So they were designed with that in mind. This is just a slide to give you a quick overview and remind me to hide my little thing at the bottom there if I can. There we go. So Ira just finished his welcome. And I'm going to allow my colleagues, Gina and Linda Kelly, to give a few opening remarks next. Then I'm going to proceed with really an overview of the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook, which you can see a little picture of in the upper right-hand corner, including its Living Fieldbook, which is a supplemental website that includes learning guides for those of you that are interested in trying to use it as a teaching tool. And then I'm going to also give, at the end, some of my own experiences using the Fieldbook in the course that I'm currently teaching at Fordham University. We've already heard from Iris, so now I'm going to allow my colleagues Gina and Linda to give a few opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Ira. I'm just going to say a few brief words. I want to thank Ira for all the great work you're doing, and I'm looking forward to getting more involved in all that. I want to thank all the people who joined the call today, and I really want to thank Bill and Linda and also David Lipsky, the co-authors of this book, and all of the other people that were involved in producing it. It was truly a labor of love, a lot of labor, but a labor of love. It was 12 years in the making, as Bill will explain, from our first edition to the second edition. I think Ira was already kind of reading the purpose of the book, but just to reiterate, there was really three purposes. The first one being to build awareness and understanding of sustainability, and in all its complexity, and at not just conceptual and practical level, but also a personal level. Second, to really include and energize and engage people and expand their commitment to sustainability. And third, most important, providing the information, the tools, the resources that people need to actually get involved and do something, to move from the knowing through the knowing-doing gap we talk about it. What's very unique about our book is it's about the human side of sustainability. I personally am a psychologist. And so what we blended the best of knowledge and expertise and current thinking around leadership, what it means to be a leader of sustainability, engagement, employee engagement, change management, etc. So the human elements in the context of all of the challenges that we face, And these are really the keys, we believe, to the kinds of long-term shifts in people's values and in their everyday behavior, as well as in the decisions that businesses are making every day that are necessary for the kind of whole system change that we see is necessary. So I'm going to close my remarks by reading one of my mentors, who I absolutely think the world of for about 40 years, Dave Ulrich at the University of Michigan. And his testimonial literally brought me to tears when I saw it. And he said, wow, this incredible work defines both the breadth and depth of the sustainability movement. The activities, cases, and tools delineate the qualities of a sustainable enterprise with insight, practical value, and passion. It will shape the path to a better world for at least another 10 years. Mega kudos to the authors for this amazing compendium, the definitive statement of the sustainable enterprise. So with that, I will turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Linda, and she'll say a few words. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming today. I'm Bill Zagina's partner in Transition to Green and one of the co-authors on the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook. And I also want to thank all the many people who have contributed to the book, not only writing, but feeding us input and testing things out. So it really has been a group effort here. What we've written is a field book. And while we hope it's a good read, our intent is to provide people with important concepts, practical information, activities, case studies, and tools, effective tools. And the acronym, by the way, spells out ACT, which is not accidental. But the tools for the work that people are doing in the field. They're on the ground, in the companies, in the organizations, actually working to make sustainability a reality. And we recognize that we're living in a time of significant and often unpredictable change. So we've taken a systems approach to sustainability that allows practitioners to better see essential interconnections and recognize the opportunities those interactions reveal, as well as develop resources to handle emerging changes that are not only unknown, but in very many ways unknowable ahead of time. Ours is also a tremendous time of tremendous opportunity and hope. And we've included in the book examples of innovative, inspiring work that a number of companies are undertaking. And so we hope you will dig into those and learn from them as we have. So I'm going to turn it back to Bill, who will be walking us all through an overview of what you will find in this book.
Well, thank you, Gina. Thank you, Linda. And again, like they have said, I have to thank everyone that was involved in the creation of the book. I also want to thank Ira and all of the other universities and professors out there that I've been working with these past many years. I am currently teaching as an adjunct at Fordham University, and you're going to hear more about my course towards the end of this webinar. But I've also been a professor at Columbia University, where I taught the green accounting class there for over 5 years. And I've also had teaching positions at Bard and at Fairleigh Dickinson University. So I much appreciate the work going on to try and improve our ability to actually teach this complex subject of sustainability. I'm going to be going through next the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the Fieldbook itself and how it got to this second edition. Then I'm going to briefly run through the chapters and the content of the book. I'm going to introduce you also to the Living Fieldbook, which is this supplemental website that we've created because we could not fit all of the great information that we shared within the limits of a paper-bound book. And within that field book, we've also created learning guides for people that are actually trying to use the book as a teaching tool. I'm going to take a break after that for some questions, so please do use your chat function and give Ira some questions. He'll be screening them, and so when we get to that break, I'll be able to address some of those questions at that moment. And then we're going to proceed on to the course that I created at Fordham University, and I'll be able to share that experience. So on the left-hand side of your screen is really the beginnings of all of this work. And it was began with some work that we were doing with Fairleigh Dickinson University and a large survey that was taken to identify the qualities of the leaders in sustainability at that time, which is now 2006, which feels like a lifetime ago. But out of that research came this pyramid as a way of framing what a sustainable enterprise looked like, and what were the qualities of those best practicing enterprises. And so if you look on the left side of the pyramid, you can see that we ended up organizing those qualities into 3 stages. The foundational stage, which included making sustainability central to the strategy of the company, as well as other things like senior management support and embedded values. And then as we moved up the pyramid, we saw that those programs needed to gain traction and ultimately become integrated into the company. So that was the framing back in 2006 that we used to organize and structure the first edition of the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook, which you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. The theme of that, the tagline, if you will, of that first edition was "When it all comes together." And I know that that was a passionate epiphany that my co-author Gina had at that time, but it was also about our work to try to come up with the holistic and integrated way of organizing the enterprise. But when we reflected back on the first edition of the book, as we made the decision to create a second edition, it was very obvious that the original edition was still in that stage of using sustainability as a driver of profits for the companies that embraced it. And so the real theme that it had throughout all of its chapters was one of sustainability as an opportunity for improving the performance of a company, but primarily from a profit and an incentive that was still economically driven. And we certainly at the time were already aware of and embracing the triple bottom line. So as we started to really look at the second edition, and in our opening to the book, we actually framed what has changed in these past 10 years. And it became clear to us that the skills that were becoming more and more valuable and maybe a little undervalued in 2008 was that of systems thinking. And then the newer terminology of integrated thinking. And so those 2 themes have now been woven throughout all of the chapters of the book. And along with that was our maturing, if you will, of how to deal with what was becoming barriers to accomplishing sustainability, which was dealing with conflicts and everyone, entrenching in their particular right and wrong mentalities. And so one of the things that also emerged as we were writing this version of the field book was the idea of managing paradoxes or identifying paradoxes and managing through those, as opposed to seeing things as either or problems. The other thing that happened as we started to look at the integration of all the chapters of the second edition was we started to use the analogy of building a bridge. And so our tagline for the second edition of the book became "Building New Bridges." And I think you'll see as we go through some of the chapters how we use that bridge metaphor to advance this theme. And I think it worked really, really well. So what you're looking at now is just an overview of the contents of the book. And I think you can see how we built upon both the pyramid and the first edition as we created our parts of the book. So we did begin with our introduction and overview, and that was really trying to provide all of our readers with a common context, because if we don't all start from some common beliefs and common understanding, then we could easily speak past each other. The first or the second part of the book is really that first layer of the pyramid, where we are still trying to prepare and build the foundation for a sustainable enterprise. And so those first 3 chapters that I'll be going through next on leadership for sustainable enterprise, mental models for sustainability, and then my favorite, of course, sustainability aligned strategies, all of those were part of that foundational layer of the pyramid. And then our chapters progress into embracing and managing change for sustainability. And in that segment of the book, we have managing the change to sustainable enterprise, employee engagement, and again, my other favorite, of course, enterprise sustainability metrics and reporting. All of that starts to help and build the enterprise to those less mature and also vital skills of looking at sustainability from a holistic and, in this case, global context. So we've in chapter 7, we're going to touch upon sustainable globalization, and then the emergent new business models that are helping us to leverage the key skill of collaboration, leverage technology, and help build strong communities for sustainability. And then we culminate the book with our part 5, building new bridges to the future, and chapter 9, which is our description of the path forward, which I'll be showing you in just a few moments. So now I'm going to run you through each of the 9 chapters of the book and briefly touch upon some of their high points. Chapter 1 was our leadership chapter, and the lead author of that chapter was a great man, Dick Knowles. He had his whole career with DuPont, and through that experiences that he has, he created some great leadership tools like the process Enneagram, which you're looking at in the figure on the right-hand side of your screen. And some of the core philosophies that we had about leadership in a sustainable enterprise was that the enterprise was really not the machine that it was, that many techniques for management have you believe. And so we saw the enterprise as one that was people-centric and human-centric. And because of that, we saw this role of leadership as being one that wasn't just held by the C-suite people in the company, but we saw the opportunity for every employee and every person associated with the company to be leaders in their own right. And so that idea of self-organization and the empowerment that every person could be a leader in the company was really the philosophy that we used. And of course, we now are seeing that and seeing the company itself as the collection of people. So the company is now not a machine, but a vibrant living system. So it becomes the people that are the key tool, the key resource for driving change and driving progress in the enterprise. So chapter 2 focuses on this element of mental models, and we've already expressed how we've used system thinking as a core skill throughout every chapter. And systems, the basics of systems thinking have been introduced at the beginning of chapter 2 in our mental models approach. We've leveraged the work of great systems thinkers and the people that matured systems thinking, like Donella Meadows, like Peter Senge. So their works have influenced us in the way that we leverage systems, and also as the way we see mental models as a skill and so important item of how we understand our world to be working and our companies to be working. Just real quickly on the right-hand side, you can see that part of systems thinking and part of our view of mental models is that mental models are both personal, so it's about mindfulness and your ability to understand your own beliefs and your own behaviors, and it's also a social skill, so we can understand how, as we're trying to change the culture of a company or change the more holistic systems of society, that we have to be able to see the mental models of that social system that we're trying to engage with. So we then move on in the last foundational chapter about how to create and build a sustainability aligned strategy. Working off of that bridge theme that the book has, we created this very novel, I believe, holistic, iterative approach to strategy that helps any company identify where they are in this continuous strategy and performance bridge that moves a company from being stuck and unaware about the opportunities of sustainability. And then once the companies become aware and can cross that chasm and get into action, they then begin that doing stage. And in this particular chapter, we do spend the beginning of the chapter trying to position any company's strategy within the what I would call the more reality-based movement of the sustainability progress. And so one of the things that we acknowledge is that, you know, more than 3/4 of the planet and most of the enterprises that we are now trying to engage with are only beginning the doing stage. So if you're already a doing well company, meaning that you're already profitable, and you've already begun that idea that we understand that sustainability can help us to do well, which was the theme of our first edition of the book, you're pretty far along on the bridge compared to most, but you still have a very important bridges and chasms to cross before we can get to our ultimate strong sustainability level of thriving. And I will note that in between there, we have a very important stage, which is where we see companies trying to get to right now, which is the stage of doing well and doing good. And within the book, we've introduced tools and frameworks along each of those stages of strategy. But in particular, I'll mention right now the leverage of things like the Sustainable Development Goals, which we see as a really great framing of how companies can adapt their strategies to not only do well, but also to do well and do good. And the other exciting thing about that stage was we were literally finalizing the text of the book, and it was on my birthday, January 16th, when Larry Fink came out with his letter to all of the shareholders of BlackRock, which has over $13 trillion of money under management. And in that letter to his stakeholders, he emphasized how BlackRock was no longer going to evaluate their investments from the perspective of how profitable or how well the company was doing, but how they were going to be required to demonstrate how they were going to do well and do good for society. Within that thriving section, we introduce some of the maybe less popular but very valuable tools and initiatives like the Future Fit benchmark program and like some of the work of the Reporting 3.0 initiative. And so we do know that many people are already aware of strong sustainability and the need to get to a thriving state eventually. So now we move on to that second level of helping the companies advance and implement their sustainability programs. And that opened up with Chapter 4 of Managing the Change to a Sustainable Enterprise. Like many best practices, we focused on the fact that we need to build up our capacity to deal with change. We need to be able to assess our readiness for change. And we want to give the readers a number of different skills and frameworks that they can use to help implement their particular change programs. The framework that we use to deal with change is that, let's face it, change is happening all around us. So we look at change from both the perspective of the unintended or unplanned for disruptive change that we are certainly experiencing in the real world today. And then we also acknowledge that there is what many companies try to do, which is that planned change. And when you're trying to execute that strategy and you're trying to do so in a way that is planned, but we always expect that even the planned changes, that they're never going to happen in that linear way, that all system changes generally don't occur linearly. And so therefore, we look at it and expect to have to adapt and adjust whatever change program and whichever change framework where we are using at the time. And that's why you can see on the picture on the right-hand side that our overall theme is one about being agile, dealing with addressing the fact that the old normal gets disruptive. We have to start implementing and moving into action. Whenever we move into action and start to practice things, we give our followers, our readers, we give them the permission to have some failures and to expect some failures as they're moving through their own implementation stages, and learn from your failures, begin to adapt, and then ultimately you can settle into that new normal. But we all know that that new normal is really going to be disrupted before it even settles in. So we do see change as a constant. As we've said, our view of sustainability and sustainable enterprise is very people-centric, human-centric, and obviously because of that, we see sustainable enterprises as being very employee-centric. And so employee engagement is a really critical element of advancing the sustainable enterprise. The exciting thing that we see here about employee engagement is that once a company starts to embrace sustainability and sustainability principles and practices, it actually is a great lens through which they can actually engage their employees. One of the features of a sustainable enterprise is that it is more focused on its own purpose as an enterprise and the purpose of this system that it's operating within. And we also see this as relevant to the people of the company, so that the employees are going to be able to better connect their own personal passions and their personal purpose with that of the company that they're choosing to, work within. On the right, we are showing one of the kinds of strong engagement frameworks that we've embraced. This one was developed by a very good colleague of ours, Renee Lertzman, and it shows how we approach a more holistic view to employee engagement by actually looking at a person from the person's background. What culture did the person come from? What kinds of emotions and real world experiences are the employees having to deal with as they're trying to work at the same time, that work-life balance that we acknowledge. We also acknowledge that as we're trying to deal with the human side of employee engagement, there are many, many technological advancements and systems and tools like gamification, for example, that can be leveraged to really help advance the need for employee engagement. And then we also recognize that it's, we can have all these great systems and training programs, but it's really about our behaviors. And so leadership, leading by example, and observing, being more observant about the actual behaviors of the employees and the leadership of the company becomes part of effective employee engagement. So then we move on to chapter 6, which is the last chapter of this second stage of the pyramid. And the focus on sustainability metrics was embedded in, again, we used the framing of the sustainability strategies to guide this particular chapter. And so common to all of the stages, whether you're in the doing stage, the doing well, and doing good, are things like understanding the purpose of your strategy and the purpose of your organization. So we give that system framing some real meat by setting goals. How do you set SMART goals? Those are measurable, actionable, and I'm forgetting all of the other acronyms there, but we want sustainability aligned SMART goals. We also look at the resources. So measuring sustainability performance as a system, we care about the stocks, which is the wealth of a particular resource, and then how quickly that resource is being utilized within the enterprise system, and that's the flow of that resource. And ultimately, some resource is the limiting one, which would determine the runways that the company is working on at that particular stage. The framework that we've embraced here is also one that is not just a financial framework, but we've embraced a multi-capital framework. For those who have been following the sustainability reporting world, you can see on the right-hand side that we acknowledge communicating the performance of companies from both a voluntary perspective like that of the Global Reporting Initiative, as well as one that's trying to leverage a more regulatory perspective like the work being done within the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and how all of those sustainability performance reporting groups are now all collaborating together to try to come up with a more integrated framework. And so the one at the top you see there is the Integrated Reporting Initiative. And again, all of these initiatives that we showcase in the chapter, it's not meant that any one of them has to go away, but it's really how to help harness all of them and see the strengths and weaknesses of each as we move from just becoming aware of sustainability all the way through to get to thriving sustainability metrics and performance. The thriving stage has been showcased with the Science-Based Targets Initiative, as well as some of the work of the Reporting 3.0 initiative and Renee Rayworth and her donut economics. So we've captured all of those in a very introductory but complementary way. So our last stages of the book focused on globalization. And in this case, we've created our 6 lenses of globalization as the way that we've framed the chapter. As you can see in the bullets there, those are our 6 lenses: the one of the economic and financial perspective, the role of technology and the world, poverty and equity, material limits and limits to growth, the movement of talent, and that's not the movement of immigration as we're seeing today in the news, but in this case, we're focused on it from the perspective of the enterprise and the need to have the proper skills and then the geopolitical lens. And then our final chapter was about new business models, and new business models that in particular leveraged the skills that we saw as being vital to getting to that integrated, holistic stage of a sustainable enterprise. So we focused on collaboration, technology, and helping to build community. And again, one of the key skills here that we focus on over and over is the ability to be a holistic, integrated thinker, and also to leverage leadership and our understanding of complex networks and complex system to actually scale and grow the performance and the ultimate impact of every enterprise. So architecting participation is one of the elements of this particular chapter, and one of our favorites is about technology and how technology is actually going to be part of our future in a sustainable world. The book closes with chapter 9, which is our building new bridges. We kind of culminate that bridge analogy. And within chapter 9, we've used a force field type analogy. So what you'll see in chapter 9 is a story that identified what we thought were the top 10 driving forces for change, as well as the top 10 refraining or forces that were impeding change. We organized those forces into ones that dealt with each of the 3 pillars of the triple bottom line. So we had forces associated with improving profits and financial performance or an equitable economy. And those forces included things like the multi-capital stocks and flow approach that I mentioned earlier, and some of the impeding forces dealing with the economy, like our continued attachment to unlimited economic growth as one of the competing paradigms associated with our ability to accommodate growth and sustainable use of natural resources. When we thought about the world and the planet and the environment, we saw opportunities for change, like creating a circular economy where all of our materials were being recycled and reused. And that was looking at the impeding change force of things like acknowledging that our material resources are constrained. And one of the things I didn't mention earlier was our use of what's called the daily triangle as a way to frame the natural resources as our ultimate means for accomplishing everything that we need to do in the world, but also ultimately the ultimate ends of everything that we're doing, the ultimate outcome, which is one of maximizing the well-being of all of the people on the planet. So all of that is framed within chapter 9, and we created this diagram, which you're looking at on the right, as a way of visually explaining how the book came together. So you can see the pillars of the bridge being the chapters that you've just looked at. We use metrics, for example, as the guide rails and the feedback signals of this system. And we use adaptation, collaboration, and innovation as really the accelerants of the journey. And we also believe that this journey of the sustainable enterprise has to begin from a hopeful, optimistic framework, because to do otherwise would just cause all of the companies to remain stuck and not see the potential that sustainability brings for them. Ira, I think this might be a good time to break and see if we've got any questions at this point.
It's also a good time to see whether you can hear me.
Good point, and yes, I am hearing you.
Yeah, I shut down some competing applications on my computer, so hopefully that worked. No questions have come in on the chat box yet, but there are a couple of questions. for you on what you've presented so far. One question is, where do you and your co-authors stand on the emergence of the circular economy? And the other question is, on your slide that graphically displayed all of the various competing reporting approaches, would you hazard a guess on how that's going to shake out, and also what happens to all of those voluntary approaches when the Securities and Exchange Commission finally adopts the ESG framework for regulatory reporting?
Well, I'll take that question in order. So we are very big fans of the circular economy. In our models chapter, and also throughout the book, we are acknowledging that our natural resources are our limited natural capital. And they are, so being a limited resource, we believe that a circular economy, which is one where we are recycling and taking back as much of our, technical resources that we're creating, is the right approach. We're obviously not there right now, but we certainly support it, and we do see it as one of many mental models about the strategies of business. So when we think about a circular economy business model, we would also acknowledge that there are other complementary business models, like, for example, a sharing economy that leverages assets across multiple people, like Uber and like Airbnb would do. We also recognize with the use of technology, new business models like the digital economy. So we leave room for multiple business models, but we certainly saw the circular economy as one that we embraced and supported, because we recognized natural capital as as the constraining resource within the economy and within our ultimate getting to a thriving state. When I
Bill,
thought
if
about,
I could add in a couple of things, examples here, so far as natural resources go, and this is Linda. Two resources that we talk about in the book are phosphorus and graphite. So they're common, they're in everyday use. We need phosphorus in food, we have it in paints, we have it in even explosives, but food in particular, the mining of phosphorus doesn't happen everywhere in the world. And although it is not a rare mineral or material, it is only located or concentrated in a few places in the world. So about 20% of what we use in the United States comes from Central Florida. It's not like we can go somewhere else like New Jersey and get more. There isn't more there. And what happens in the cycle is, if we use it on the farmlands in the Midwest and then do not recapture it, do not recycle it into a circular economy, and it goes down the Mississippi River tributaries and into the Gulf of Mexico, it gets dissipated into the water in what is essentially non-recoverable in our lifetimes. Would it be recoverable eventually? Yeah, probably in about 10,000 years, but not now. So we are on the path to running out of phosphorus, which is an essential catalyst in metabolism for living things on Earth, and we're not recycling it. We could talk about other things that are mentioned in the book, but that's just one quick example.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to jump over to the other part of the question here, but as you can see, we've embraced not just the idea of sustainability in the doing well and doing good mode, but we do see strong sustainability as our ultimate end that we must get to. And so our use of the word thriving, and others have used flourishing, and trying to create, businesses that are even regenerative, that is something that we aspire to. And so when I look at things like, people's work today in sustainability reporting, which happens to be one of my strong suits, if you will, I was one of the founders of the GRI, and so I appreciate its strengths and weaknesses. I'm very active with SASB right now, so I understand the desire to enforce laws, particularly U.S. perspectives on SEC reporting, that drive so many publicly traded companies. But our stance within the book is a little bit broader than that. So, we would say bring it on. Anything that's going to improve disclosures and the measuring of sustainability performance, we would support. If it becomes a legislative element to advancing it, then we would be obviously having to manage the current paradox between who's going to be leading all of this. Is it going to be the shareholders and the capital markets, or is it going to be government? I certainly don't put all of my eggs in any basket. And so managing through that type of continuous improvement on sustainability reporting is going to be a paradox that we welcome and feel we can use a best of approach to get us there. And that includes sustainability reporting that isn't focused on economic performance, but is going to focus on measuring the ultimate goal of thriving. And so the work of the Reporting 3.0 initiative and the Future Fit benchmark, for example, need to be acknowledged. And also some of the work in tracking our global scientific performance with the planetary boundaries. So I think we're looking forward to progress in sustainability reporting, but it's a lot more than just reporting. It's getting to the outcome of sustainable performance. With that, Ira, I'm going to continue on, and then we'll take questions again at the end.
Yeah, I was going to say, please move on to your road test of the book portion of the presentation. And if I could ask Gina or Linda to take a look at the question that Anton Camarada posted regarding getting a desk copy for review. If one of you could post the answer to that important question in the chat box so everyone has that information.
I'm actually doing that right now, but also Bill has a link and a slide on that coming up, but I'll put it there.
Great, thank you.
I've been lingering on this slide for a little bit, so I hope everybody has taken note of the URL that's underneath the title, because you can immediately now go and see our Living Fieldbook. And this is just the opening in the About of the Living Fieldbook page, but our colleague Nalini, who I want to acknowledge here, she's on the webinar now, she helped us to create this supplementary website because we had so much that we wanted to communicate and share within the book, and we couldn't do it all. So we started to immediately create this website. And so the website it's organized, as you can see, by our chapters, and they can get to the chapter abstracts and then specific chapters, but it allowed us to include much more detailed information within each chapter's content. So this is an example of the Living Fieldbook for just the activities element of what we've added from the book. So this showing of the Living Fieldbook indicates that for this chapter, we have many activities, and if I could scroll down, which I can't, you'd also be seeing more case studies and more tools than even what's shown in the book. And this one indicates that there's also more material in a learning guide section for people that are trying to teach leadership in whatever form you choose to try and teach it. And so had you clicked through to that learning guide component of the Living Fieldbook, it would then show you that we already have suggested activities, that teachers can use, and those activities have been structured. We encourage all of you, because this audience is all trying to advance teaching, and we encourage all of you, once you start to see the book and the Living Field book, that you have the opportunity to contribute your own ideas to it. And to answer the question before, we have the ability with our publisher, Routledge, to get people that are trying to use the book in a teaching mode to get you a copy of the book, whether that's an e-copy version of the book or a hard copy, I'm not sure. But the point is that our publisher wants to get it out to every one of you that wants to give it a look and see how you can use it in your own way for teaching sustainability. And with that, I'm going to show you my first real-world experience using the textbook, using the field book as a textbook for teaching a class. So I was given...
Interrupt for 1 second, say thank you, and I need to go teach. So I really appreciate Bill did a fabulous job. Yay, Bill. And I look forward to further discussions with all of you. If you have any questions at all or want our input on your syllabus or how you could use it, feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much. I got to go teach.
Thanks, Gina.
So we're actually practicing what we preach here. Gina obviously teaches several courses at Rutgers University. My current teaching is with Fordham, and the class that I'm teaching is called Foundations of Sustainable Business. So I'm going to run you through that. I really have loved, this is the first course that I've taught at Fordham University, and so I've loved some of the freedom that it gave me to try and bring in some of the elements that I don't normally talk about, like spirituality, within a sustainable business course. But so this was the course description, and for this course I had 36 students, and it was part of an existing sustainable business minor. So I was not the first person to teach foundations of sustainable business within this sustainable business minor, but I was given the opportunity to make it my own. And because the book had just come out, I used the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook as my textbook. Just for background, about 1/3 of the students in the course had sustainable business minors, and for them the course was mandatory. And then about 2/3 of the course were people that were taking the course as an elective, and many of them were economics majors. I haven't, you can see these slides later, so I'm not going to dwell on this particular slide, but this was the course description that people were given as they were making the decision whether to take the course as an elective or not. And I will tell you that all of the 36 students had some appreciation for sustainability, and they did have some existing passion to want to learn more about how sustainability might be used in a business context. These were some of the topics, and I'm sure now that you've seen the book chapters, these topics would be no surprise to you. And again, for this particular course, we did emphasize the book and this people-centric view of how to create a sustainable business. Already shared that the textbook was our required reading for the course, and we leveraged the Living Field book for supplemental information for all of the students. Fordham used Blackboard as its learning platform, so I was able to integrate both the Living Field book and Blackboard as my way of interacting with the students. For this particular course, I know all of us struggle with how do we create meaningful learning assessment tools, and so I used a journaling process, and thanks to Ira for one of the people who suggested the use of journaling as a good way for students to embed the learnings from each class. Then we also used a midterm assignment, which was, in this case, either their ability to create an internship or do a book review, not the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook, but some other book. And then we were able to discuss all of those diverse methods and frameworks within the midterm project. And then we used a final project, which was trying to apply the tools presented in the book for some real company assessment. I've included the syllabus of the course just to give you a sense as to how I organized it. And one thing you should note right away is that we don't just linearly follow the field book. We opened actually with week 2, after giving an introduction and an overview, with a sustainability context lecture that included both the beginning introduction to the field book as well as a glimpse into the future state that we were trying to go for. And so we did chapter 1 and chapter 9 as our initial readings. We progressed through sustainability strategy to sort of complete the foundation elements. And we also needed to get people prepared to start working on their midterm projects right away. So it wasn't until really week 6 and week 7 actually was when we first transitioned from a more general perspective about sustainable business into a more functional set of lectures. And this was also trying to mirror a bit the course that I inherited. So in week 7, when we talk about sustainability, accounting, and finance, that was the beginning of changing the tone of each lecture from one of being holistic and a build to one that became more siloed and functionally oriented. But throughout, we couldn't help but maintain some integrated conversation. So this is the second half of the course, and this was when some of our deliverables start to be due. And I will share that I noted that even things like journaling became a little bit more stressful, as the people didn't just have to read and journal, but they had to read, journal, and work on a project. The other thing about the course was that first midterm project was primarily done as individuals. And now as we moved through the second part of the course, we had organized ourselves into teams. And so as we went through each of these individual functional lectures, they were also working in teams on their final project. And so very quickly, you can see how we leveraged the chapters of the book to also orient around functions like IT and HR, marketing. Marketing and sales in week 12 was the only week that we didn't have a corresponding chapter in the field book to guide us. And so it was quite interesting to see how all of the other chapters had surrounded the topic of marketing, in particular things like big data and social media, which we had covered in that business models chapter, but how they were now being applied in a more specific way to help market and sell things. And then we culminated the class with this week. It just happened to be this week's lecture, which was about change management. And so that was my ability to help focus the students, not from now textbook learning, but to get out into their lives and apply everything that they had learned in the class in their careers and in their lives. So week is going to be my final lecture for the course, and that's when I get to enjoy the fruits of all of the final projects where they've applied all of the textbook items in their assessment of an actual company. So I wanted to show this slide because another theme that we did to bring contextual reality to this otherwise what could become an academic discussion of sustainable business was that every week of the class we had some current event conversation. And this happens to be the build of all of the different current event conversations over the last 13 weeks. And so it just reminded everybody about how fast change was being imposed upon us through things like the hurricanes that we've lived through in the last 13 weeks. And all of the advancements in the scientific reports that came out by the IPCC. And then just this week, the National Climate Assessment came out. And so we were able to connect the real world changes that were being imposed upon us as individuals and being imposed upon all of the real world businesses. So the things like tariffs that came up and things like the migration of people come up, the international trade associated with Brexit. So we were able to interconnect all of those relevant, urgent, real world things with elements of the class and, of course, back to the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook itself. So these were just my summary of course reflections of how well the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook worked as a tool for teaching. It was highly effective. The students were able to comprehend. Most of my teaching prior to this was all done at the graduate school level. This course is at the undergraduate level, and yet the students were able to read the textbook, read the field book, and comprehend it sufficiently so that as I was able to complement the book with my lectures and with the journaling process, it was really, really a satisfying experience. The Living Field Book became a very good tool for them. Before they even started any particular chapter, they tended to go to the Living Field Book, which contained a chapter abstract, and it also gave them a good sense of real world cases that they could use to make whatever they were reading even more vibrant. The journaling worked. I will say that it became a bit labor intensive. So I encourage journaling as a tool for teaching. At the same time, I'm open, and if any of you have suggestions, feel free to email me about ways to make journaling and the grading of journals a little bit less labor intensive. Again, we welcome all of you to take this field book now and turn it into whatever course you're imagining and to make it your own. And then also we as a team within the Sustainable Enterprise Fieldbook authors, and there's many contributing authors. So we all want to work with you, with Ira, with the Sustainability Curriculum Consortium to really make sustainability happen in the world. So with that, I'll close and take on any additional questions that might have come up, and know that we're in this journey forever. So no matter when we come across the opportunity to engage with each other, please know that we are welcoming it.
Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. I am making a last call for comments and questions to be posted in the chat box. Nothing new has come in as yet, but I also appreciated the review of your experience at Fordham. I would just offer one comment on the journaling. And as you know, I have used that technique myself. I don't think it needs to be as labor intensive if you boil down to the primary purposes of doing the journaling. It is very effective to make sure at the most basic level that the students are keeping up with the reading. But beyond that, assuming that they are conscientious in keeping up with the reading, it gives you a clue in advance of the next class as a teacher what concepts are well understood and which ones are going to need a little bit more work. So I'm sure that, Bill, you found that to be the case. I also liked the idea of offering them the option of reading a book to review. One of the things that I've encountered in teaching my sustainability and business class is the "why should we believe you" phenomena, and they're right. They shouldn't take me as the sole voice, and I encourage them to read a book by one of the gurus out there to understand what their approach, their framework is, and compare and contrast it to what is presented in their textbook. So with that, I will say that there's now a question in the chat box from Valentina, who says, "Thanks a lot for your excellent presentation. You presented a linear model of development that businesses go through. How is this linear view compatible with the holistic and systemic view on development? And further, do you think there could be a danger that this linear model suggests that business has to first become financially viable before it becomes viable in a strong sustainability perspective?"
Well, it's interesting that the perception of what I presented was a linear view, because throughout the book, when we take a systems perspective, we emphasize that systems do not change linearly. And so even though that strategy bridge that I presented in my metrics do show that continuous progression, and I do believe that that continuous progression was helpful and useful in getting companies that were unaware or not, they were stuck and not active, to get them moving. Do I think that that was sufficient? I'll bring my answer back to my course, because when I was teaching the course and using the field book, I fell into my own bias and my own trap of emphasizing the incremental change of shell casing. As I was doing that, we were discussing climate change in particular in our discussion groups and in our current events. And I acknowledged that linear change would not be sufficient to get us to avoid crisis in society, nor would it be sufficient to get to a sustainable economy and sustainable business. And therefore, I actually changed the final project assessment, and I forced the students to consider that linear change was not an option, and that we had to get to a strong sustainability outcome in a time frame that might have been shorter than what gradual change would have allowed. And so next week, I'll get the privilege of seeing what changes when you give a recommendation to a company that says, you can make more money by being sustainable, or you can even contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. But I've also forced them to say that neither of those options is enough, and we have to have a recommendation to advance the company to a thriving state quickly. So I hope that helps you to appreciate that we did not view sustainable progress linearly, at least not all the time.
Can I add a little bit in here, Bill?
Sure, you always do.
Yeah, and that is, systems change not only is not linear, it's iterative. So that when you make changes in any complex system, the changes that you are making ripple through and change the conditions that of the system as a whole. So it's kind of like the old the African been to the same river twice. And so one of the reasons we have the emphasis on chapter 2 in mental models is to prepare people for looking at the world in a different way, for shifting mental models, so that the expectation or the dedication isn't to starting in one point, taking the steps that are already planned and expecting that you're going to get a preconceived result, because with complex systems that doesn't happen. So Bill and I often use a metaphor that is somewhat simple but effective of a basketball game and players in a basketball game. And if you are, if you have the ball and you are dribbling and you get it inside closer to the basket, you always have the opportunity of shooting or passing, but you don't know ahead of time what the other players on your team or the opposing team are going to do. So you have to always be adapting your strategy. You're skilled, you're highly competent, but you don't know exactly what the next steps are going to be. And that is very much the same way with going through the process of sustainability. And ideally, are you going to be financially viable and strong ahead of time? Oh yeah, who wouldn't want to be? But with so many internal and external changes going on around us, we have to build the financial strength as we're building sustainability. It's the old build the bridge as you're walking on it.
So thank you, Linda. And I just wanted to close with my own thought about that element, which was that those companies right now, particularly the large multinational companies that are already doing well, they are already acknowledging that in order for them to sustain themselves, that they're going to have to get engaged with improving society, that they are the best positioned to take risk and to try something that might move them to thriving. Because if we rely on just the Elon Musks of the world to always, rely on the capital markets and then just throw Hail Mary passes as to, going from zero to thriving, and I do support those, but they're always, that's in a win-lose kind of a model where they either become billionaires or they go bankrupt. And so I do believe that my philosophy and strategy puts a little bit more pressure onto the large multinational companies that are powerful and that are successful and that have a lot of resources to take more risks and to progress their own progress beyond what they're comfortable trying to do or report about. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it back to Ira and just thank everybody for listening. And if you have any questions or just experiences that you'd like to share, I can't wait to hear them.
Great job, Bill. Thank you so much. This was an excellent presentation. Let me also say in closing that anyone within the sound of my voice who has a useful tool, a book or approach or an idea that fit within our themes of pedagogy, content, and leadership for sustainability in higher education, you're invited and encouraged to lead a webinar for Sustainability Curriculum Consortium. All you need to do is to reach out and contact me. We're getting to the end of the semester. It's a busy time. I'm already locking in dates and topics for January, February, and March. But before the end of the semester, we have 2 more Sustainability Curriculum Consortium webinars. December 5th with Nick Ashford from MIT and Ralph Hall from Virginia Tech. They'll be talking about technology, globalization, and sustainable development. And on December 10th, Robert Sroof from Duquesne will be talking about integrated management, how sustainability creates value for any business and any curriculum. With that, another round of thank yous to Bill and his co-authors. Thank you all for sticking with us throughout, and I will see you next time.
Thank you, Ira. Bye-bye.